Well, good evening and welcome to this live stream, 20th of February 2024. Martin North here from Digital Finance Analytics. Great to have you on the show tonight, and we're going to talk property with Chris Bates. Very interesting conversation, very important conversation. As always, just before I bring him in, let me just remind you, as I always do, that we don't provide specific financial or legal advice. This is a general property conversation only. We moderate the chat, but encourage you to throw your chat and questions in. We'll try and get to any questions that you throw in at us. I've got a few already to explore. As at the 20th of February 24, if you're watching in replay, if you'd like to get my attention and specifically ask a question, if you use @WalkTheWorld, then that puts the question into my queue, separate queue, so I can see it more clearly. I encourage you to interact in the chat and be civil, but throw your questions and comments and things there. I won't necessarily follow everything that's going on in the chat. I've also enabled Super Chat, which means you can get your questions up the list or indeed make a contribution to what we do around here. And as I often say, we don't do this for profit. We do this because we think there's a really important conversation to have. Anyway, with that done, let me bring Chris in. Hello, Chris. How are you?
Life's good, Martin. Always good to catch up. You made me laugh a couple of times already, so I think I'm going to get my cat cam here on my two little cats. Hopefully this delivery doesn't come. So we'll see. I'm waiting for that knock. Let's see what happens.
Oh, it's quite hilarious, and of course the dogs will go off like mad if UPS arrives.
Yeah, yeah.
It goes mad here. Anyway, we'll make it. So if it happens, just keep talking, and I'll arrive back shortly. Just fill in. Let's just get a couple of intros out the way. You should introduce yourself, but also talk a little bit about the exciting news you just shared with me.
Yeah, so if you haven't seen me on here before, my name's Chris Bates. I've been coming on this show for 5 years, I think it is, Martin. If not longer, it might even be 6 years or 7 years on quite a regular basis. So if you haven't seen me on here before, I was a financial advisor for a long time. I started this business 10 years ago in a few months, and we gave up our financial advice license back in 2020, mainly because we fell absolutely in love with helping younger people around what we believe their biggest challenge is financially, and that's their property decisions. And we've invested all our energy and time and our team's knowledge into trying to help people make good and better property decisions. And the most important part of, a big part of that is their finance. So we act as mortgage brokers. We don't do the purchasing for them. We work with lots of different buyers agents all over the country. It's probably 50 different companies, to be honest. And, usually multiple that we refer to a client in different areas. Exciting news is we've grown to a team of 20. We were figuring out what do we do for the next few years, and a friend who's been a broker, similar size business, is actually joining our business, and we're merging, and we whole new rebrand, and it's all going live tomorrow. So Blusk is changing to Flint Group, and Christian Stevens, which is very well known in the broking world. He's got Australian Broker of the Year at one award. I won at the other one, and we're combining together with a whole other bunch of people are joining us as well, and so we'll have probably a team of 50 and lots of different specialists in different niches as well. So private banking to agri to financial planning relationships to real estate to property management. So it's a big change. Been 6 months in work, it's been exhausting, but we're the lights at the end of the tunnel and we're coming out the other side.
Wow, exciting. So we've gone from Blusk. Well, actually, we got from Weathful to Blusk to Flint.
That's right. And I only rebranded last year, getting away from Wealthful because we were doing a lot of work with financial advisors and we wanted to stay out of their lane with the word wealth. But never hold on to anything in life too tightly, Martin. If a good opportunity and a better move comes up, and so part of the process is we decided to rebrand, and Flint is the new name. So it'll all be going live tomorrow, but the website's up now if people go and have a look at it.
Well, congratulations, and I'll go and have a look at the website a little later. But look, there's a lot to talk about, and I'd like to start the conversation with some questions around mortgage underwriting. So, part of the story of what's happening in the property market is availability of finance. And it seems to me that depending on the type of borrower that you are and where you are in your life story, the ability to get finance or not is quite different. and that's creating some very interesting, but also some pretty horrendous conditions for some types of borrowers. So what are you seeing?
Look, I think it's a really tough time for people on medium to low incomes if they haven't entered the market or they need to refinance. It's borrowing capacity is the tightest I've ever seen it. When I started back in 2013, 2014, I was blown away of how much you could borrow based on your income, 10, 12, 14 times, particularly if you knew how to do calculators across lots of different banks. It's roughly, 4 to 4.5 times now for that sort of medium to lower incomes. The irony or the frustrating thing at the moment, I would say, is that higher incomes aren't getting affected by household expenditure measure or HEM as much, and they can borrow at a higher multiple. And so they're the ones who are really active in the market. CBA did some research, Jarden published research on this as well, to show that higher income people are dominating the market, are the ones that are out there active, and potentially also the wage growth has been skewed towards that as well, and intergenerational wealth and lots of other things that are more likely, I guess. And so, yeah, that's what we're seeing. You've seen it. You're seeing a real talk from the banks, which is in the bank's interest, to relax serviceability buffers, around APRA. And, unfortunately, this is creating a bigger divide, more and more inequality. And it's absolutely true. The people who have been able to transact in the last few years are the higher incomes, are the people who have had access to cash from intergenerational wealth. And they're the ones who have been buying ahead of, in a market that has got lots of headwinds. You can't say, can't argue that rates aren't high right now. You can't argue that borrowing capacity is really tight. You can't argue that consumer sentiment isn't really low. But you'd like to say if those things start to flip the other way, consumer sentiment start to improve, rate expectations start to improve, and borrowing capacity, tax cuts, APRA, bank innovation, and policy change, and rate cuts and borrowing capacity, then these are all tailwinds for a property market. And I think that's the real issue at the moment. Is it's the haves and have-nots was already a problem, but I think it's just got worse and in the last probably few years.
And let's talk about that in the context of family money, because the other big thing that I see is the bank of mum and dad, or I now call it the family bank, because it isn't just parents, it's siblings, and it's grandparents and all sorts of other people. Anybody who has any family wealth that they can tap into, it seems to me that's a really big force now, which is driving some interesting behaviors. But again, it puts other people way out.
It's funny you said siblings, Martin. I've noticed that in recent times as well, which I haven't really seen. I've seen brothers and sisters lend quite significant sums to their family markets because they've seen that that's worked for them, and they can see that they're struggling, particularly maybe they have kids or they want to, and they know that, if they lend them a bit of money, they would, and they're potentially having some type of agreement off to the side that, when I sell, I'll give you the money back, or I'll pay you interest, or you can get some equity returns. And a bit more of a, I'll lend it, but I'll get a benefit, rather than the parents and the grandparents. When I was an advisor, there was always this, in the 2030s, there's going to be this, the baby boomers are all dying and they're all going to pass it down. And this is going to be this big transfer of wealth. I think it's already happening. I've really been surprised over the last 12 to 18 months, the deposits and that we're seeing way bigger than we've ever seen before. I think there's the pressure. The parents could see there's the rental crisis. They can see that housing affordability crisis isn't going away. There's no easy end in sight. And they're worried that if they don't help them now, they might miss the boat. And they actually think it's not a bad time. And they've done well in property before, or they've got assets. So they want to really help them while they can and while they think it's a good time. And they're passing it down earlier. And, I think it's pretty crazy, because that's just leveraging money. So if the parents give $600,000, $200,000 to 3 kids, let's say, then those 3 kids enter the market and then go and borrow another $3 million combined. Well, that $600,000 has just created another 3.6, let's just call it, in the property market. And that's the thing that's happening, is the wealth's passing down, but then it's getting re-leveraged. And that's, I don't think there's really an end in sight. You think about things like the attack at superannuation on higher balances and, trying to discourage people having more than a few million in super. well then, yeah, if you're going to start paying tax on that, maybe that I'd have to do some selling and have to pay capital gains tax and have to pay tax on it. Well, why don't we give it down to the kids? Grandparents dying and saying, well, my kids are doing okay. They don't need the money, and they're getting closer to retirement. Well, let's just bypass them and go straight to the grandkids. And so, this is absolutely what we're seeing. And, that's unfortunately the people who are active in the market. And it's really hard for first home buyers right now who've got real issues around borrowing capacity. There's no real major, the 5% deposit home loans are still there. And, but, there are caps on terms of the limits you can enter the market. And so I think they're still there. But, I think I do feel for a lot for the first home buyers because prices haven't fallen, but their capacity's fallen still 30% than what it was. But maybe prices have come off 5 or 10%, or maybe they're even higher depending on where they're looking to buy.
Right. And you make a really interesting point, and I'm seeing this in some of my research, that property price movements are not uniform across any of the cities that we look at, right? So even in Sydney, where there have been some very strong areas, and if you look at some of the more affluent suburbs, you can see significant rises. In other areas, prices have been falling and are still falling. And so it does seem to me that we come back to this rather difficult question of where you buy and what you buy and who you are all determines your status vis-a-vis the property market. And so there isn't a one-size-fits-all story here. You've got to have a much more granular look. As I often say, granularity is critical. But which areas of Sydney do you think are the ones that are really most interesting at the moment? I noticed that some of the northern beaches, there's some high levels of mortgage stress there. There's some high levels of leverage, but prices seem to be quite strong, for example.
Well, I'm up on the beaches. I don't think everything's selling like hotcakes, and that's not just the beaches, that's across the whole city. So buyers are still picky. They know they've got to go into a lot of debt. They know they've got to pay a lot of interest. And yes, they want to enter, but they're not in this sort of FOMO and I'll just buy anything and I'll just look past all the compromises because they know that their mortgage repayment is still going to jump dramatically over what they're paying in rent. And so, not everything's selling fast. So something that's compromised, something that, has some issues, they're definitely not selling. But if a good property comes on, there's obviously some pent-up demand and that's what's driving prices. So there is a bit of a two-speed. Whereas a hot market, everything sells, and the stuff that's really great sells at a massive premium. The things that are not that great sells not that much cheaper because the buyers just move to something else because they're worried if they don't buy now, they're going to miss out. Obviously, I think the high density of apartment market, I've been talking about this probably a decade, to be honest, when I got very educated around supply and the issues around high density and new builds and investor driven, etc. I think there's still, even though there's a rental crisis and even though, prices are, potentially going up, I don't think they're still performing that way. They didn't go up in the boom. They're still struggling. There's still lots of choice. And a lot of the first home buyers are much more educated, I would say, than they were 5 or 10 years ago. They're aware of new build issues. The defect thing's quite well publicized now. They can see the short-term investment returns have been dismal or they've gone down, and that makes them a little bit apprehensive to enter. That would change, though, when they get pushed out of the suburbs they really want to be and the compromises, and they'll go, well, I just want to secure something. And so if the market really starts to pick up speed, you'll find a lot of first home buyers start making those compromises. I can already see that happening where they miss out at a few auctions and then they start trying to just solve the problem and go and buy something that's easy to buy and look past the investment fundamentals just to get something to live in. And so, I would say that they're still struggling. The other reason why they're struggling is there's absolutely investors bailing out of the market. When their performance hasn't been great, they're now losing on cash flow. There's no end in sight. There's lots of supply. They're getting smashed on their home. It's much better to sell the investment property, reduce their cash flow, maybe free up a little bit of cash, maybe not, and then try to get through to the other side till when rates are much more manageable on their home. And I would say there's, Pippa did some research on this, probably 6 months ago. But you can see that a lot of investors are considering leaving, and that's not great when you've got a rental crisis. Ultimately, investors create rental accommodation, right? And so if investors are leaving, they're reducing places that people can rent. And I would say there's not enough investors entering to offset the amount of investors leaving. And so what that means is, if you are renting now, you're getting smashed on, huge rent increases. You're trying to save for a deposit, or maybe just trying to save for your personal wealth, but now your rent's going up, right? So it's a housing affordability crisis. It's a mortgage affordability crisis if you have leveraged up, and it's a rental crisis, and then you've got a homelessness crisis, etc. So no matter where you look at the property market, probably the only ones that are doing well are the baby boomers cashed up, no debt, who have got some money in the bank and are probably happy to, be getting 6 or 7, 6% or 5% on their cash rather than 1 or 2% that they've been getting for a few years.
Very interesting point on that, Chris, because in my surveys, I've seen a significant switch over the last year or so from those people who had investment properties, actually, particularly in Melbourne, where the yields are actually very, very low. And what we're seeing there is now that they think they can get better returns elsewhere, particularly, of course, as you say, term deposits. And that's one of the reasons why we're seeing listings in Melbourne rise very significantly. And a lot of the property that's coming on are old investment properties. The standards have been tightened in Victoria in terms of what you have to do if you're going to actually let a property for investment purposes. And what that means is that the pressure of doing that is switching people out. But of course, you make the absolute right point. That is reducing the supply of rental property to the demand, which is continuing to rise. I would argue that migration is part of the reason why demand for investment properties are increasing from a rental perspective. But from a supply side, it's going backwards. So this is another reason why the property market is, absolutely disastrous for many people in the rental sector. And my rental stress numbers they've never been higher. So people are having to pay a lot. And in some cases, 60% of their income is now going to pay the rent. It's pretty horrendous. And I don't really see any change.
Yeah, so Melbourne's an interesting case study. So the performance down there has not been as strong as other capital cities, and particularly when you start looking at, new townhouses in particular, apartments and high-density apartments. And Melbourne's got much more relaxed planning controls than Sydney. Brisbane's probably more like Melbourne, right? And you could build down there for fun. Land was cheap, and you could build really high, and so the feasibility would stack up, and investors would buy it, whether they're locally or overseas. And there was a building boom. And every time I go to Melbourne, there's always more towers getting built, right? And so I do think a lot of the new ones are shifting to the more boutique, higher end part of, try to get downsizer market or the more prestige apartment market rather than the high density, try to build them as cheap as possible and sell them to investors. But I would say there's still a huge amount of stock there. So if investors are saying, well, I bought an apartment for 410, it's worth 420, or it's worth 370 10, 15 years later. These are the realities of the investment returns. Now my rates have gone up. Why would I hold on to this thing anymore? I'm just going to get rid of it. It's a dud. So I think that's one of the things that the Melbourne market, I think a lot of first-time buyers aren't going to fall for it though. And why it reduces the rental stock is, well, it comes out of the market when you try to list it. A lot of people try to sell property without it being tenanted. So if it sits on the market for 3 months or 6 months trying to sell, well, that's out of the rental stock. But it's likely that another investor isn't going to buy it. And maybe an owner-occupier is going to buy it. And so that's where it sort of reduces the rental stock. If another investor buys it and they rent it out, well, yeah, absolutely. I think it's been very anti-investor down there. The changes with land tax, I'm all for tenants' rights. I think, there's... it's hard enough. I think we should be supporting tenants, and I know landlords probably aren't going to like it, but taking care of your property, I think it's a good thing. And so, I'm for a lot of that. I think the land tax though, they really have hit second homes down there. That's been a really big focus.
Yep.
And so the people who had the house in Brighton or Sandringham or Camberwell, and then they had a little beach shack down in Sorrento or Portsea or something down in the Mornington Peninsula, they have to look at it now and go, I've been smashed with an Airbnb tax, 7.5%. I've been smashed with land tax. Maybe I can't go down there as much because of this hybrid working from home thing, and they're getting me back to the office. So I'm not using it as much. Oh, maybe I should just get rid of it. I'm getting smashed on my interest rate, particularly for those ones that leveraged up over the last few years down there. I think that they're in a bit of pain, to be honest. I think that they bought in a really hot, undersupplied market, and I think it's flipping to, a lot of stock, a lot of choice. And unless it's something super special, people are like, well, I've got choice. There's no rush down here. And that's the sort of spiraling effect. You get more supply, buyers are less urgency, then there's more supply comes on, and then buyers get even more choice. And then there's like that's what you really need to see major price falls, is a supply influx that just keeps on coming. And that's one pocket that I would say is struggling, not just because of, but a lot to do with the Victorian tax changes. I think, if you, look counter-cyclical and you look over sort of 5 to 7 years, what we're seeing in Sydney already, probably the last 2 months, I would say, like maybe back in December, November a little bit as well, is we did see a flight back to the inner ring of the capital city, the return to work tussle between, are we back 1 day, are we back 2 days, 3 days, 4 days? People were very nervous around their jobs compared to they were 12 months before that. They were less likely that worker mobility was probably reducing, less expectations of bonuses and, being able to switch and get huge pay rises. So I think people were like, well, actually, no, I don't want to lose my job right now, particularly if I had a mortgage. And so I don't want to leave the capital city. And, I know I can't move to Central Coast or north of Wollongong because I'm going to have to come in 3 or 4 days. But we're already seeing that buyer, particularly if they were thinking about upgrading, or a first-home buyer, they're getting pushed out of the areas they want to be in. They would love a house, can't afford a house in the areas they want to be. Now they can't afford the bigger apartments. And they're like, well, do I then move further out, or do I just make this lifestyle shift up to the Central Coast or north of Wollongong or Newcastle, whatever it might be? And I'm just going to have to take the risk with work. Or maybe I'm really confident on work because work's kept, as sort of, all my industry sort of has a standard now where it's 60, 70% at home, 1 or 2 days in the city, and maybe I can negotiate that down. So I think that's an interesting thing that we've seen. And when you think about Mornington, I think that's another thing. Maybe it's not now, but as people get pushed out of the inner north, the inner west, the east, the Bayside, then they're going, okay, well, I'm going to commute. Well, maybe I could commute from a little bit further and live down on the coast down there. So, and it'll move to more of an owner-occupier market rather than a second home market, which has probably been in the past. That's an interesting pocket.
Yeah, very interesting, Chris. There's so much to talk about there. But just before I come,
sorry, mate, I probably talked a lot.
No. It's, this is why it's such an interesting subject, because there are so many dimensions. Cookie Boy made the point that unemployment rate slowly creeping up. Is there any sign there of panic, of refinancing? We might come on to that in a second, because I think that's a really critical. I've always felt that the unemployment question is going to probably be the most critical question with regard to what's happening with the property. Now, unemployment is sort of connected to interest rates, right? And the RBA notes came out today, again indicating that rate cuts are unlikely for some time. Rate rises also probably unlikely, so they're going to sort of go sideways. So therefore, if there's no change in rates in the short term, the unemployment situation is, definitely going to be an issue. Bora, just to refer back to you, let me just cover this. Joe said, intermittent ads are destroying the stream continuity. Yeah, it's YouTube. I can't do anything about that. YouTube just decide to throw ads in. I can't control it. So I'm afraid you'll have to either get an ad blocker, which of course doesn't help me, or roll with the ads. But you don't miss anything. It just delays the stream very slightly. And just before I come back to you, Chris, Cookie Boy said, will the other states follow Victoria with some of those property market taxes? They probably will, but probably not as much as Victoria. So unemployment, are you seeing any evidence of that? Is it indicating any concerns among borrowers, potential borrowers?
Look, I think, obviously people are losing jobs, people are getting made redundant, but, it depends on whether their ability to get another job or whether they can take a pay cut. We look at our mortgage book, we're not seeing major arrears. We've got few clients on payment holidays, but that's it, 1,000+ clients. It's not, and you can see that through all the bank data. It's not like, we're just talking anecdotally on our book. Unemployment increases, right? So there's probably already a long-term unemployed. There's always sort of a minimum unemployed, right? But let's say it goes up 1%, right? That's 100,000 people that have, no longer working. Okay, so maybe that some of them, are potentially have no buffers, and are now going to really struggle with the mortgage. Now, have they got help from family? No. Have they got any other thing they can sell? No. Okay, so then they go speak to the bank. Well, the bank's going to work with them, right? And, maybe they've got a little bit of cash and maybe they can push it. So the bank's not going to rush them to sell. There'll be a payment holiday there. And in that time, they may get another job or, etc. So they might be able to get through it. They're not going to rush and put their property on the market straight away. And, because the transaction costs, the fear of not getting back into the market or going and renting something, disruption to the family, so that's the reality, right? So even if that does start to creep up, it's not going to be immediate. It's going to take some time. Look, if it went up dramatically and then everyone was very apprehensive around their job future, so it went up 3 or 4 percent, then you would absolutely, I think, lose a lot of buyers. Even if 1% of people lost their jobs, well, that probably wouldn't reduce the demand in the property market anyway. Yeah, some of those people were looking to buy and transact. So absolutely, there's a small reduction in, I was pre-approved, but then I got made redundant. Okay, I'm not a buyer anymore, right? So there's a little bit of that. But ultimately, a lot of the people in the market are the people who are very positive on their short-term work prospects, right? So they're more likely not to get made redundant and more likely not to lose their job. Hence why they've got the confidence right now to enter the market under higher interest rates. And so, that's the marginal buyer thing really is what you've got to really focus on with prices, right? And so, some people are in the market right now, but if this person over here is losing their job and they're not in the market, well, it doesn't really matter, right? And so, I think and it's more a case of if a lot of the buyers in the market leave because they're all start worrying about their jobs. So unemployment's really starting to ramp up and no one feels safe. And, businesses are shutting down and self-employed market, and that's what I think you're going to see a real issue. But creeping up, I think that's just showing that rates are working and,
Yeah, and interestingly, the spread of unemployment is not uniform, right? Again, I see this in my surveys, right? So, if you go over to Western Sydney, you're starting to see the unemployment rate rise quite a lot in some of those postcodes. The hours worked is going down. That's the other factor that people should bear in mind. It isn't just binary, have work, have no work. It's how much work can you get. The hours worked is dropping. And that's quite a significant factor, and that's probably another pressure. But there are other people who are doing quite well. Also, people are switching jobs, and quite often when they're switching jobs, they're actually being able to lift their income by 10 or 15% because there's still shortages of some types of workers in some types of industries. So again, it's a matter of trying to understand some of those dynamics. Interestingly, one of the other observations I've got is that CBA, when they put their last affordability matrix together, assumed 2 full incomes from the household. 2 full incomes. Now, if you go back a few years, and I know, Chris, that wasn't normal.
Well, I mean, that's one of the things that's pushed up prices a lot over the last few decades, right? You went from 1 income to 1 and maybe 1 part-time, and now you got 2 full-time, right? Often the case. And so, that leads to a lot more of household incomes, which is borrowing capacity, et cetera. So you can't then potentially go to 3 or 4 times incomes. I mean, that multi-generation and friends coming together and, purchasing together, it's not unheard of. Maybe that's the future. In other countries, particularly in Scandinavia, that is common. I don't know if that's going to happen. I think there's going to be probably the other compromises people are going to make before they go, my only option is to live with my brother or sister or, a friend. But I do think it's going to be the choice people are forced to make. And, particularly with family members and parents and things like that, we've absolutely seen that where, parents are getting to a bit more an older age, they wanting to be around grandkids, the kids wanting them around because they're having grandkids. And so it's a mutually beneficial things to combine resources. And so I think that's definitely happening. And that's why I think, the incomes, obviously, with the household, you're right, it's not always been 2 full-time incomes.
Yeah, and that, of course, is the interesting observation. Again, in my surveys, I see this not uniformly, but in a number of areas, the average individual income and the household income is a significant multiple. In others, not so much. And so that tells me that the dynamics again are quite varied. The other thought here is that with banks wanting to make sure that people don't actually topple over, they are doing quite a lot to try and help. And interest only, extend the term of the loan, all of those things. But Chris Joy made an interesting article the other day. I don't know whether you saw it. That he said if you look at the delinquency rates. The delinquency rates are going up slightly amongst the majors. And in fact, CBA reported a slightly rise in delinquency rates. But delinquency rates are a lot stronger in the non-bank sector. And he actually had a chart that showed the divergence, which would suggest that maybe it's some of the non-banks who tend to lend possibly to people with slightly less good credit or slightly more adverse situations that are going to be exposed first. To what extent do you think he's right that there's a diversity of activity and intent between the banks and the non-banks? I know you don't do much with the non-banks.
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, when you look at loan flows and you look at how much percentage of loans go to non-banks, right? They don't go to the big four, they don't go to Macquarie and Suncorp's now big four, ING and Citi, etc. So when you look at the actual flows that don't go to the banks and the building societies and they go to these non-banks, it's very little flows that have been going there over years. We've would be like the industry, but we'd probably be even less than that, to be honest. We are very aware of the risks of going to non-banks. Not so much to us, to be honest. Like it's not us borrowing the money, right? It's it's the clients that are borrowing the money and we're going, well, yeah, I could potentially borrow a bit more. So absolutely, you could borrow more with non-banks, particularly investors. But there's little quirks with their policy and potentially different things they do around verification income. Things they're doing around assessment buffers and. Absolutely. If you wanted to maximize your borrowing capacity, it was harder to do that just at the big four and, and the second tier lenders, you would go to non-banks, right? The problem is when things start to turn the other way, right? Borrowing capacity gets really tight. They start having funding issues. Maybe you can't refinance out. You're already paying a higher rate usually as well. Those rates don't get cut or you don't get great retention pricing, which is what's really supported, mortgage holders in the last 12, 18 months is even if banks think that you can't refinance, they've probably got all your income details and, they have been pretty good on retention pricing. Even the banks that haven't been the best at retention pricing and have the best access to data have still been quite generous. I think there's been a pressure from APRA, hey guys, in this, you've got to support your borrowers. We don't want you guys just trying to cream up as much profit as you can. Non-banks though, they don't care, right? If you're in a contract and you're at a high rate, they're just going to try to take as much money as you can because ultimately they knew that there were always going to be a stopgap. People don't just go to a non-bank and then stay there forever. They go there, they get their lending, and then they try to refinance a few years later. And so I think they're getting smashed with A, more investors, B, higher rates, so it's less likely to be able to keep it, and C, people who have leveraged up the most, hence why they went to non-banks. And so I think that's an issue. It's been highlighted in other downturns before, but I think it's been massively highlighted in this one just due to the severity of borrowing capacity cuts. So someone who's already leveraged and can't borrow at other banks, then they get a huge borrowing capacity cut, so they get stuck at a non-bank on a very average rate. They won't reduce their rate, so their option is to sell. They maybe bought a lot of investors have stuffed it up. Let's be honest, they have bought the poorer properties. They've gone for a quantity over quality strategy. They've gone into more of the apartment market. They try to time markets and try to go with a bargain hunt mentality and buy things that aren't scarce, just things that they think they can get a good deal on. And then when this is kind of flipped the other way, they're the properties where you've got more investors, they may be reading on some forum so then they're in an area where there's a lot of other people who are leveraged up. And so then all of a sudden there's these listings of investors bailing because they've all followed the same strategy. And so I think that's one of the issues, I think, for the non-banks is, yeah, absolutely. But, are their loan books that ridiculously big and their higher percentage based on their loan book, when you compare that, like it's not, I think it's a great article, but when you sort of dilute it down to the reality and what that means for the property market, well, yeah, I don't think it's such a big deal. I think Chris Joy's had an amazing forecasting. He's very well respected. He's probably, smart. I've been in the room with him before and watching him at work, and answering questions and stuff like that. The amount of knowledge in his brain. But I think, when he looks back on the last 2 years in his forecasts, he'd be, admit that he was surprised. He's got to be surprised at the resilience in the property market and how he didn't probably call the bounce back as strong as it is. And he expected falls to be much higher. He thought what Jarden thought and what the banks thought, that when you cut borrowing capacities significantly, you'll find that prices fall. And I think that's been a big surprise for everyone, including him. So I'm waiting for him to come out and change his forecasts. Given the last time he was predicting falls, or the property market was a few years ago. If you ever want to come on Elephant in the Room, Chris, the door is always open. So let me know.
And I tell you something, Chris. I was surprised by the strength in the property market. I actually realized that the reason that the models were actually under forecasting potential movements was actually the migration factor. The migration factor was a stronger one than I'd actually originally plugged in, because I hadn't seen the forward view of where migration was flowing to. And I would argue that one of the main reasons why property prices are where they are is that migration has supported the significant demand at a time when those borrowing ratios were actually going quite adverse. Without that, there would have been more falls. So in a way, the 600,000 or whatever the latest number is of people coming into the country, of whom quite a few are borrowing to be able to get property or have money and don't need to borrow to get property, has supported property markets in a number of areas. For me, that's one of the critical factors and one of the variables.
Yeah, I think migration is. I mean, we chatted in COVID, right? And there was a belief, hey, migration's going to turn off. Hey, property prices are going to crash, right? That was getting perpetuated. If you go back to listen to that, I was saying, well, migration doesn't immediately to buyers, right? If they enter, you don't just go and buy the first month that you enter. Maybe you do if you've got, ridiculous family wealth and they would rather you own something than rent something. But often that's not what, people do. It takes them many years. We work a lot with, new migrants to the country, 3-4 years down the line. And so absolutely, I think it's led to a bit of a rental crisis, and the rental crisis has led to people to get out of the rental market. And that's not saying the new migration. It's the people who are seeing their rents go up. Maybe they're born here, maybe they moved here 5-10 years ago. That's, I think, what the bigger thing is. It's the pressure on the rental market has then forced people to want to leave the rental market to enter the market as buyers. Rather than all that migration being buyers in the market. I just don't think that's the reality when you look at it in students and what that migration is. I would say the biggest thing that supported prices was the reduction in listings and the reduction in quality listings, and the increase in a turnover rate, the decrease in our turnover rate. This is something that I think is going to really play out over the next decades, right? That sort of belief that maybe you had an apartment, then you upgrade to a smaller house, and you renovate it, and then you get a bigger house, and then you get even a bigger house. And I'm not saying that's what people, but that ability to jump up the ladder, let's call it, I just don't think it's, feasible or the reality. You look at the jumps, they're huge, right? And so what you'll find is that people will be stuck in their homes, even if they wanted to live on a different street or a different suburb or would need a bigger house, they just won't be able to do it. Unless the government finally says, I'm not going to charge stamp duty. But when they do that, the prices will go up way more than what the stamp duty thing is. It's just demand and supply. That's a transacting, creating event. So if you want prices to not go up, then don't be asking for stamp duty to go, because you'll bite you in the foot. So we saw that last year, actually. A prime example where first-time buyers didn't have to pay stamp duty up to 1.5. What happened? Prices went up more than 5%. So the properties that should have been selling at 1.3 were selling at 1.5. So they've got to pay stamp duty, plus they've got to pay selling costs, plus it's the fear of making the wrong decision. Plus there's always a risk with transacting property, unless your property is a real dud and nothing could be worse than this. And ultimately, have they got the borrowing capacity for it? They've already had to delay it. So they would love to have done it maybe 5 years ago when the kids were a bit smaller, but they haven't. So now the kids are in the teenage year, let's just deal with it for another 5 years, right? They're going to be out of home soon. And so that's making people less appetite. So you're just seeing this real, what would you call it, a freeze of assets where people are like, maybe I was only going to live here for 10 years, but now I'm going to live here for 20 years or 30 years, because the ability to just go and buy something else just isn't really an option. And the borrowing capacity, even paying the higher rates, I think that'll change as borrowing capacity starts to increase, and some people want to sort of cash in. You saw it in 2021, and and other booms, 2017, when prices go up, listings naturally increase, A, because of consumer confidence, but B, you do see some people sort of downsizing out of the market, and people are willing to trade up because they go, well, if I don't trade up now, then I won't be able to. So I'm not saying everyone's never going to transact, but I do think that chunk and the average length someone lives in their home is going to really start ballooning. I think Domain's done some research. Don't quote me. It was like maybe 7 or 8 years. Now it's 14 years, the average length someone's living in a home. So that means that properties are transacting at half the rate. Yep. And so that property's turning over every 14 years now, not every 7 years. And who's to say that doesn't go to 20 years? And I think that reduction in supply, people just batting down the hatches, even though borrowing capacity's fallen, even though rates have gone up, there hasn't been this explosion in listings. And you saw that in late 2022, it fell off a cliff. No boom in spring, no boom in autumn, no boom in spring in listings, even though there was all these articles that listings are going to go up through the roof and all that sort of stuff. It's just not the reality. And I don't think it'll happen in 2024 in a lot of the areas that people want to buy. People are just won't transact unless you're talking about those other areas we're talking about. But that to me was the real thing that supported it, was the reduction in listings through that people think, well, I don't need to sell because I aren't seeing prices fall and they're stabilizing. Maybe they're even going back up. Well, I'm not going to get out because I feel like if I don't get out, I'm in trouble. I can just hold on.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw that in my surveys, and I measure the up traders and the down traders, as well as the people who are trying to get into the market first time. So appetite amongst first-time buyers is very strong, but a lot of first-time buyers are finding it really difficult to get in simply because of the underwritings we've been talking about. Those who are looking to upsize, there is still quite a few of them looking to do that, but then they're extending themselves, and so they've got some financial pressures. But the down traders are the really interesting. There's 1.2 million households in my surveys who say, I'm likely to downtrade, not necessarily today, but over the next 5 years. 1.2 million, right? Now, when you actually probe into that, they've got real issues. Firstly, they have to buy something else, which means effectively they've got to pay the stamp duty to buy the property that they're going to buy, it be smaller. Secondly, of course, if they are down trading, you ask the question, well, why are you down trading? In some cases, they're doing it to release equity so that they can help family members, or they can put money into superannuation, the 300k superannuation injection that you can do. All of those things are there. But the big issue with down traders is they're saying they can't find the property they want to move to. And so it's making it really difficult for them to actually do anything, right? And so they're sitting in these large properties, often older, often in properties that are probably too big for them, but they can't find anything. So there's a really interesting dynamic going on in the down trader section. And a lot of that is in some of the more affluent areas in and around Sydney, interestingly.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Mexican standoff, right? So the family that's outgrowing the 2-bed or the 2-bed apartment, the sunroof or the garden apartment, that the downsizers would love to do, lock up and leave. It's in an area that I want to be. They want to be in the house. But they can't afford to make that move, and there's not enough choice, so they're stuck there. But then the downsizer wants to move into their property, but they can't find it because they're not moving, and so that's absolutely what happens. Is the people can't transact because there's not enough choice, and I think but ultimately, if they want to help their kids probably want to help buy what they want to buy as well. The kids aren't going to go and buy their parents' home; it's just too much of a jump. But they probably want to buy that 2-bed, that garden apartment. And just generalizing here, that the parents want to downsize into. That there's been an underbuilding of the stuff that downsizers really want as well. I think that's where, if you are doing resi projects, you can look at places like Double Bay right now. Well, Fortis is smashing it. Look on every corner there. They're building for the affluent downsizer. But that doesn't mean it's just the people in Double Bay, to be honest. It's people from all over Sydney that, that are maybe selling houses that are moving there. And so, there's been a real, and I think it's really hard for developers for the feasibility, and they've got a good site right now. The issues with all the builders and, materials and getting access to labor and getting access to finance is really hard. So, there's not like a building boom, right? And so the downsizers that would love a new property, let's be honest, when they're getting to that stage, they do want something that's, they don't have to renovate, they don't have to worry about it. They can sort of lock up and leave. It's more down near the town centre, so they can walk around. But, you know, the developers can't build it fast enough. It's a real subset of the market, and, you know, a lot of builders haven't got the capital to enter in those markets as well. And so, yeah, so there is that. They are going to, and there will be that building boom, but that's going to be really slow. I mean, yeah, people are wanting to downsize, but then there's also like an emotional element to it as well, like to actually make those decisions, particularly as you get a bit older, your appetite to make those decisions, actually, there's like a golden window, I would say, where people are willing to downsize and they're feeling confident, they're feeling secure, they're feeling like they can still take risks. As people get older, they get more conservative and often stay in their property all the way through to the very end. And I don't think many people want to go into aged care, right, when they get older, right? So they do everything they can to stay in their homes. Even the government supports them. You've seen a lot of innovation around equity release. This is, you know, not a good thing when you, this person potentially, you know, may for a society reason downsize because they've got 5 bedrooms free and, you know, maybe that could go to someone who needs those 5 bedrooms, but they go, well, I don't need to downsize. Yeah, maybe I'm running out of money, but now I can do a government release of equity. I can get access to a reverse mortgage. So I think there's going to be a lot of innovation in this space. And people are living longer, right, Martin? So, you know, if they do get to these ages and, you know, one party passes away, well, you know, the other one might live for another 10 years, you know. When I was back giving advice a long time ago, I saw some stats that if, you know, a couple got to 65, you know, it's likely that one of them is going to live to 92. And it's in the kids' interests often to keep the parents in the property. Like, let's be honest here. You know, the kids if they don't really need the money, well, they know it's a good asset, mum's house, it's growing tax-free. Let's just keep her there for as long as possible. She says she doesn't want to leave, and then we'll split it when, you know, she passes on. And that's better than giving it to us and selling it at this price versus what we could sell it for in 5 or 10 years' time. So I think a lot of that's happening as well. But yeah, so I think that downside, I think it's like kind of the unemployment rate conversation. Yeah, if 1.2 million people rush to sell right now, but you're saying over 5 years, some of them won't do it. They lots of different reasons. And so how many actually downsize? And you're selling into a market that's undersupplied,
Yep.
You know? So you're not sort of, you know, throwing more wood on a fire when suppliers going through the list. We've had an issue with listings for, you know, a good decade, and it's getting worse. So those issues we're talking about turnover rates. So yeah, I think that story that there's these baby boomers are all going to cash out and then there's just going to be, it's actually, I believe, going to do the opposite, because what you're going to see is when people downsize, there's a transaction that happens, there's a reallocation of wealth. Often it goes down to younger families, and younger families who are still working, you can still borrow money, and it'll be a re-leverage event. Whether it goes to parents or goes to the kids, I do think that it would be more likely leveraged up even further. You know, debt at those levels is going to be higher than it would be at, you know, the older generation.
Yeah, well, it's clear to me that this is going to be a long-term story, right? And I suppose it depends a little bit on what happens to house prices ahead and whether interest rates come back down, et cetera, et cetera. But the critical issue is lack of supply. There's a lack of supply for first-time buyers, but there's also a lack of supply for down traders. You know, we aren't building enough stuff of any sort, let alone the right sort, to be able to actually meet the demands we've got. Now let's move the conversation forward, because of course the Greens are pushing quite hard for a revisit of negative gearing and maybe even capital gains. And there were some statistics that came out quite recently that showed that the governments are actually, state and federal, are throwing a lot of money at the property market through all these different mechanisms. What's your perspective? If you know, is the negative gearing discussion a real discussion, or is it just a furphy? What do you think?
Gotta be careful with this one, right? You may say that negative gearing is not a good thing. That's what's causing prices to rise. What happens if we change negative gearing, get rid of it, increase the capital gains tax? What's the consequences, unintended consequences of this? So what you will do is you'll make investing in property less enticing. So that might be a good thing, you think. But what is that going to do for a rental crisis? And is that really effective? Have investors really bought the properties that you want to own? go look at the area that you want to own and go have a look at what the owner-occupier rate is in that suburb. And it might be 70, it might be 80%, it might be 90%. So if you kill the investor market, doesn't mean you're going to reduce prices in the areas that you want to buy. You might smash high density, you might, but if you don't want to buy it, then so you've got to be careful what you wish for a little bit here. What you also do is if you kill the demand for investing, that'll encourage people to go into more debt for their home. And so what people will do is go, well, I'm not going to buy another investment property. I'm going to upgrade my home. And what you will see is this more allocation to owner-occupier markets. And so they'll grow at a faster rate, I would say, if you remove negative gearing, particularly because the home grows tax-free, right? And so you've just got like the whole idea is that the issue in the property market is one thing. That's not the truth, and investors aren't if you're renting a property, well, you're renting a property because the investor bought it, right? And so I think that it's an easy thing. And if it comes up and it goes through, then I think you'll find some issues down the line. Look, I think the capital gains tax is probably not a bad call. I think, I think when you look at the capital gains tax you pay on investments versus the income tax and the discount, and maybe you could reduce that or, reduce that discount to 25% or something. But if you adjust it to property, you're going to have to increase it to shares. And so what you're saying is tax me more because I think that that's going to reduce prices. Well, what happens if it doesn't, right? And so you just pay more tax. So be careful what you wish for here. Particularly like often a lot of people who can't afford houses buy investment properties, So, a lot of people who are forced to, are worried about housing unaffordability. Maybe they haven't entered the market. They get a little bit deposit and then they often are investors and they often use negative gearing because it's their only way into the market. And rather than leaving the money in the bank, I'm going to have to rent because I can't afford to buy one when I live, but I'm going to go and buy an investment property. And then they get the benefits of no CGT, reduced CGT, lower rates and negative gearing. What happens if you reduce that opportunity for them? Now they have to buy something to live in because it's not as enticing. A lot of investors are first-time buyers as well. They want to be first-time buyers, but they're actually first-time investors instead. And so what you're saying is to a lot of the younger generation is, hey, you can't use the tax benefits that I got to build my wealth. And so I think you're also, the people who probably want the benefits of those things are probably going to be the ones who hurt, unfortunately, the most. The cashed up investors, it's probably got other investment properties. They're out in the marketplace, but their properties are probably neutrally geared right now. They've probably got some positive cash flow in one property. Maybe that can offset losses in, depending on how they do the policy. They could say, as long as your total portfolio isn't negative, that's okay. Maybe they're doing it on a property basis, but that's going to be really hard to manage. So maybe if they say that your total property income is higher than your total cost, well, that's okay. So you've just, I do think these policies aren't that well thought through. That's the truth of it.
No, absolutely. And, there's always the simple political message that people try and play, but there's a much more complicated matrix here of different factors pulling in a number of different directions. I'm of the view that we do need to find a way to provide more housing for rent. And I've had a view for some time that the governments have actually abrogated their responsibility for social housing. So the first part of the story should be, how do we actually get social housing back on a more level playing field than where we've been? Because we're not building enough. Then we say, well, if we actually assume that the private sector is going to provide a lot of the support for momentum in terms of providing rental for other people, then there need to be a certain level of incentives to make that happen, because without it, people will say, well, I can just put the money in the bank and get 5%. Why wouldn't I do that? Which, of course, is actually what's happening. Like I said earlier on, in Melbourne, people are actually walking with their feet. They're voting with their feet. They're moving away from investment properties, holding those, putting the money in the bank, and having a better time of it. So this is a way more complicated story than I think a lot of the headline reporting has been. But the interesting observation, the Green spokesman at the weekend on Insiders said, we have enough property in Australia. Supply isn't the problem. And I got to say, I was a bit surprised by that, because I believe that supply is a problem. But what do you think, Chris? Is supply a problem?
I haven't read that article in detail, but I think he was talking about the census, right, and saying that yeah, we haven't got probably 1 million vacant homes. Well, you know, I think these numbers are bandied about. It's been really hard to figure out how many homes are actually vacant. Trying to remember some research last year around electricity. How many homes actually use electricity in the last week or two? I think it was only 1.6% hadn't. So this vacancy, this million properties vacant, I just don't think it's true, right? And then it's some people have sort of destroyed that argument.
Define vacant, right? Because vacant is actually on a specific night in the census at the end of COVID. Right. So just bear that in mind. And we know, and there were some articles done recently that sort of parse this apart. We know that some of those are Airbnb. We know some of those are actually people in transit. We know some of those are second homes. But we also know that there's a small proportion that are actually being held vacant deliberately, particularly in some of those high-rise areas like around Docklands in Melbourne. Right. So there's a bit of it, but it's probably not 1.2 million. But even if you've got 100,000 homes that were actually vacant but could actually have people living in them, that would help.
Yeah, and I think there's going to be an attack on second homes. I think that's what the Victorian policy is trying to do, particularly things that is land that's underutilized. And so it's kind of saying, actually, you've got heaps of equity in it. Maybe you bought it 20, 30 years ago. It's gone up 5, 10 times. Debt's probably paid off because your home's paid off. But what I could probably sting you with is some big land tax bills. That you're going to go, actually, is it really worth me holding this Airbnb? I can't even Airbnb it now. There's a day restriction. B, I've got to pay this 7.5%. The property needs a bit of work. There's a bit more supply on the market. People are holidaying overseas. And so I do think there's an attack on second homes. So people, but they're going to be in pockets where, that are typically more the holiday locations, maybe they're a bit further away from the city. I think that's definitely a thing that are going to be targeted. Now, whether that's, whether there's 1 million vacant homes, I just don't believe in that. I think it's just a bit of a furphy. I think the electricity stat was a good way to think about that.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, as we come up to the top of the hour, I have a specific question from a viewer. And the question was this, she sent it to me before the show. I'm thinking of, she's a first-time buyer, right? And so she's thinking of buying, but not for a few months. But the question that she asked was, what preparation should I make now with regard to my financial situation and how I present that, so that when I actually make my application to the bank for a mortgage, because they're going to need probably an 80% mortgage, how do they maximize their success? I'm hoping that you can provide a few pointers, because I'm thinking that, you need to be able to produce information about flow status and things like that, not just a point in time.
Yeah, so the irony of this question is the person who thinks about asking that question is probably the person who doesn't need to think about asking that question, right? Because what they're doing is they're planning, they're thinking in the future, what do I need to do to prepare? So they've probably got all their accounts, their nice little buckets and little names, and got a budget, and, have got a squeaky clean credit history, and there's probably not much you need to do, to be honest. But if you have got a bit of a mess at home, you absolutely tidy yourself up. Get rid of credit cards that you aren't using limits on. Fix up your credit file. Absolutely know what your credit score is. Fix any issues on there if you can. Increase your savings. Show some really good savings habits. And around your employment. Be really aware how that would be looked at in a bank's eyes, and if there's what banks would look at it more favorably, whether it's commission or bonus or overtime, or if you're swapping jobs or you're starting a business. So, if you are thinking about doing it in a few months' time, and have those conversations with a good broker and go, look, this is my situation. And broker can go through all those things. It's not like back, I think, 20, 30 years ago, not that I was borrowing money then, but, it was more about the character and up to the bank manager and how you won it and how you dressed, and, that whole catch me if you can, rock up in the car at the front. It's just not the way that banks are lending. Banks are lending on the facts of your application, and they're not putting a face to it. The reality is. And so they're just looking at it. Do you fit policies? And banks are absolutely risk on. It's actually a really good bet for them to lend money right now under tight borrowing capacity. We're doing all the verification of your income. We're, potentially not leveraging up at high LVRs. If so, you've got to take out this insurance. when the risk was for the banks, when people were leveraging back in 2013, 2014, right? And, even in 2021, right? So when people were leveraging at 7, 8 times incomes, and now it's not really risk for banks, right? They do, and they're more aware of postcodes, and, and if a property is a higher risk for them, then they won't want to lend on it at more than 80% or 70%, or just not lend at all, because they just go, this the stuff where the risk is. I'm not going to lend on that, or I'm going to have a huge deposit, and I'm not worried about you being able to afford your mortgage because you're only borrowing at 4.5 times income. And we have to have a 3% buffer on it. So, bank, and every bank wants to grow their loan book. This is what ANZ bought Suncorp today, right? That's just a way to recoup a lot of their loan book growth when they unfortunately stuffed it up a bit with their turnaround times and their broker flows and their tech, and they had some major issues. They are definitely doing way better than they were a few years ago, ANZ, to be fair. The person asking that question is usually the person who doesn't need to worry, but just go speak to a broker and see if there's anything quirky for your situation. To be honest, everyone has got something. I'm having a deposit from a family member. Oh, how is that in your bank account? Oh, I haven't got any general say. Or, I've just started this job, and so I've only got overtime for 3 months. Or, there's something quirky there. And this is why the digital banks haven't exploded. I do think over time, digital banks will get more and more loan flows. And we're absolutely trying to be a part of this journey. We've spoken to all the digital banks and any innovation in this space. We're trying to find out what they're doing and how can we get access to their tech. Because things aren't, that vanilla for most people. There's usually something that a human needs to get involved, that they have to sort of check and review. It's why the digital banks have struggled to, TikTok that now turned to Timely, then they now have their own brokers, because they know that getting that digital loans, only for a subset of the market. And it's not the best subset, to be honest. The digital banks target people who are rate shoppers, and they leave for rate. And so they come. So their average length of loans actually lower. And if they don't offer the best rate in the marketplace, which is the lowest margin for them, then they leave. This is what the digital banks are dealing with as well.
Yeah, price sensitivity.
Big segue there. Sorry, market.
No. But price sensitivity is and digital behavior is actually quite closely correlated. And I'm fascinated because I said to the people who are running TikTok some time ago, I'm very interested to know the profile of the people you're actually attracting, because in my research, you can separate people out between those who are actually seeking a bit of advice and help and those who are very, very price sensitive. The very, very price sensitive ones are the very people who are actually digitally acutely aware, and they will switch. And by the way, that was happening in the UK for years before, and it's happening now in Australia the same way. So I'm not surprised, but it is an interesting observation on who goes to where.
Yeah, and we're absolutely pro-competition, right? Like, this is absolutely, when you look at, what was I looking at today? The net interest margin of Suncorp, I think it was like 1.7 or something. Like, that's ultimately what, as broker market share has been increasing. There's always people who, don't like brokers for some reason, but ultimately brokers have been reducing the cost of your mortgage. You can't not argue with that. Broker market share has gone from 2 to 70%. It's why CBA tried to kill brokers back in the Royal Commission with the, go fee for service, because why they try to go loans more through their proprietary channel is because it's more profitable for them. And so this is the battle going on. And so as broker market share cuts, and digital banks are part of that, we see them as actually our friends rather than because what they're doing is they're forcing banks to compete. So, and then the banks are actually competing with themselves. It's a very funny strategy that CBA brought out Unloan, and then they've just undercut, like, cannibalizing their own book. I don't get it. Matt Cognan, if you want to explain it to me, you can. I think this and what they're actually doing, we're finding clients spitting out of that. And what they're doing is they're saying, we've had quite a few of these. I got declined at so-and-so. And that comes up on your credit file, which isn't the end of the world always. It sometimes can be a big issue, because what it does, it puts a bad smell around your application. And, particularly if you're asking for exceptions with an application, or the servicing's tight, or it's a higher LVR and LMI have to get involved, what you want is a super clean application All your documents are there. Any risk mitigation factors are very well documented. So, but as a broker, we have to explain this decline loan. A good broker will actually explain that, hey, customer lodged, they lodged for too much, they got a decline. However, this is a great customer. And so we're often seeing clients go through that process and going, oh, SHIT, I didn't get that loan at, Athena or TikTok Now Timely or Well Loans or Yard or, there's a lot of people trying stuff in this space, and then they're actually coming to brokers and going, I don't want to do that again because I actually want to get approved. And so and mortgage loan is actually, complexity is actually increasing. Bank policies are getting more and more detailed. They're not becoming less. It's not like, hey, just send me your income docs and it's fine. They're saying, no, send me your income docs. Now send me your, prove that commission over the longer term. What are you buying? What's your deposit? Actually, we don't want part of that market. So we don't want to approve you because your credit score is under 800 because rates and pricing is all different and changes a lot. So mortgages are getting more complex and the need for brokers actually increasing rather than reducing.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Joe asked a very interesting question, which is, can you talk a bank out of a default? In other words, if you're getting into a difficulty, what can you say to a bank? Are there things you can say to sort of help? And I would argue, yes, you can. Communicate with the bank early. Make sure that they understand your circumstance. Ignoring what the bank says or ignoring bank communication is the most certain way of not getting the outcome you want.
Look, I love having. Sometimes you ask me questions, and I'm like, well, I actually don't know. And the reason is that we just don't see this part of the market. We just don't see. Like I said, we've got a couple of clients on payment holidays right now, and people don't just all of a sudden. Particularly investors won't go down this route. They go, we're struggling. Let's just get rid of this thing, right? So they don't even get to this stage where they're getting into arrears and they're having to. Homeowners are a bit different. And so we just don't see this part of the market. There'd be brokers that absolutely would see a lot of this, would have these conversations. Like, I absolutely know how you get loans approved, what's going to get approved, what our current clients are doing, what a lot of my broker friends are doing. We're always in conversation, hence why this merger that happened from a 5-year relationship of, what are you doing? What are we? And so we just don't see these questions. And so I actually, often when you ask me around these things, it's like, well, we just don't swim in that pond.
That's fine. Yep.
I know. Ultimately, if you think about things practically, though, it's not in the bank's interest to force you to close your loan.
Yep.
And because they've got other people in that suburb, right, that they have mortgages on. And so it's this, okay, if I can just get you through and we all do this, then we all hold the market prices up. If we all go, right, let's just kick people out of their homes and they'll have to list their properties, then they create even more supply, prices start falling and they get more risk on other books and they get other issues. The incentive is to keep people in their home, even if they're underwater, because ultimately they don't really want to try to sell that, fire sale it, the cost to do so, maybe even bigger than the cost of just letting you go in a bit more debt. Obviously, though, if there was this massive crash and banks were like, margin calling on property, that would be probably one of the cats has joined us. Sorry, Martin.
Not a problem.
Hopefully your dog didn't see the cat. But yeah, good question, Joe. I feel like I'm rambling a lot tonight, guys. It's been a lot going on at work and a 3 and a 2-year-old. I've jumped straight from a bedroom into this, so apologies, guys.
No, that's fine. Well, we're closely. I have one other question which came in beforehand, and this is actually a self-employed question. So, as a self-employed worker, again, somebody who's looking to apply for a mortgage in a few months' time, is it more complicated when you're self-employed compared with when you actually get income from a big employer? And are there things that you can do, again, to prepare the ground?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's two sides to it. So if you're starting a new business, right, and you're starting out, absolutely, you get a new job, probation probably doesn't matter. Like it's a bit of a furphy that, so if you get a job and you get a pay rise, you get a contract and you get your first pay slip, probably you can go and borrow on that. Even though you might not even make it past probation in 2 or 3 weeks' time, like the banks usually just look past that, right? if you go and start a new business, good luck borrowing money, and, businesses take longer than you expect to start doing all right. Like, you have all these forecasters and spreadsheets, and that never happens. Your costs are way higher than you expect. The time to actually get money in your doors and the length of that. And so the businesses take time, right? And so what you do is you go from being able to borrow very easily to not being able to borrow money for a few years. However, if you get through that and you survive the small business and you start to get into, a real stable business, and maybe you start doing quite well, look, now you can actually start to play it more in your favor, right? Banks will start looking at what happened in the last 12 months or maybe the last 2 years, or they'll average it. And, so potentially you can borrow more sometimes than, someone who's employed who has to borrow on what they're doing today. And so, yeah, self-employed and brokers, they actually work really closely, particularly with accountants, to be looking at how banks, and is there an opportunity to use it while we've got this great year, and, or do I lodge my tax returns or I don't, or, and this is where you really just need to have those two people, a good accountant and a good broker, just really understanding how your lending is changing. Not only with all the market and lending capacity changes, but, when you factor in how your financials are working, that can really affect how much you can borrow. And you also need to lodge it at the right bank. So some banks will look at the last 12 months, some banks will average it, some will use the lower of the 2 years. And some banks haven't got much appetite at one point, and some banks are really, there's a lot more you can sort of do there.
But again, it's about laying the ground out, isn't it? It's doing a little preparation and making sure that you engage with your broker early to be able to sort of structure the process. Because I always think that people assume that you sort of rock up on day one and then day two, you can put the mortgage application in, day 12, you get the approval. Actually, the time length of that whole process is probably a lot more extended.
Yeah, and banks are always innovating, right? Like, I was at a couple of private banks today, and we were sort of, the innovation they're doing in the high net worth, ultra high net worth space, there's always a way to try to push the envelope to lend more money. Credit growth, obviously, is part of their profit, right? And so, they have done some innovation with self-employed in recent years, where if you've been working you got pay slips for 6 months, then they'll use that income. And, one bank brought that out, and then, that's actually a really good policy. Is that going to be okay? Yeah, well, we'll do that too. And then other bank tries it, et cetera. And, I think there's going to be a lot of innovation for, longer loans. There's going to be a real pressure to reduce the serviceability buffer, particularly when rates cuts happen, because ultimately the stats are all there that higher income people are dominating the market. The lower income people and middle income are getting smashed. And, Shane Elliott's been out there. I think Ross McEwen, prior to him leaving, NAB was saying a bit of noise around this. And, what is property for the rich, right? That rhetoric, that story will be like, actually what we need to do to help them is to reduce borrowing capacity, increase borrowing capacity, reduce the serviceability buffer. Mm-hmm. The irony of that is that it'll very quickly get factored into prices. And because ultimately everyone who's buying right now is pretty much using all their capacity. Because if you can only borrow 4.5 times your income and prices have either gone up or are stable than what they were, and capacities come down dramatically, then, you're probably pushing and then you're going to family and say, hey, I can only borrow X, but I need Y. And that's what's happening at the moment. It's not like there's this spare capacity that people are going, well, even if borrowing capacity goes up, I'm not using it anyway.
Yep.
I think it'll very quickly get spent.
And there was a question just in the chat there, which was, if interest rates start to get cut, is that going to give huge impetus to the property market? Even once the first cut happens, is that enough to sort of trigger a big change? What do you think?
Look, I think there is a part of the market that needs to see the cuts happen, and they'll enter when rate cuts happen. But there's a part of the market that do it on the expectation or the future expectation of that. And there's part of the market who says, I don't really care when cuts are coming. I'm confident they're going to come at some point. I'm going to enter the market now because I think it's a good time to buy. I think we're well on the bell curve of people willing to enter the market, and that would only get increased if actual rate cuts happen. particularly if it surprises people. If we go back to our last chat, I think it was 4 months ago or something, and I always said, like, that November time, not that I've re-listened to it, but that time is always an interesting time. Listings dry up. Buyers were super fatigued. I think that's why the growth was really slowing down, at the end of last year, is capacity, but just buyers were just like, I'm over this. I'm overworked. I'm tired. And I've been looking for 3 or 4 months. I thought prices would fall, and now they've gone back up, and that buyer fatigue was really there. I think over January, a lot of that people get refreshed, that they enter the market. And we've seen that in January. We've seen a lot of the buyers that have missed out in previous cycles that have been wanting to buy, right, this year's my year. With a bit of, first-time buyers entering and a bit more investors, to be honest. Investors are saying, hey, actually, I've got my house. I don't want to upgrade. I'm just going to do some small renos. I've got heaps of equity. We're on top of our mortgage. I've got a buffer. Maybe I should buy an investment property and get in before these rate cuts and rental crisis. And, I know I can get my rent, and I want to invest in my kids. That's a motivating factor for a lot of investors, is they're seeing the issues and they're like, oh, if I don't do something now, then I need something to set them up. And so, yeah, I would say that, and it always surprises people. It can go both ways. This December, January period where more listings can come on and buyers can really cool. And so you get a lot of new stock come on in February, and buyers are like, hang on a sec, I'm not that confident. And so you can see, that Feb really disappoint. And then that then leads to more buyer concern. And so it can go both ways. But what we've often seen is that people get surprised over this period. The news gets more positive, which has definitely happened over the last 3 months. Expectation around rates, consumer sentiment may be rising. I don't know. I haven't done enough digging on that. But people are definitely more confident around this year and what's going to happen to rates. And that's been more buyers. We don't say it's this steamroll of buyers. We're not like, a lot of people are talking it up a little bit, like I've never been busy and all that sort of stuff. I don't think that's the case, to be honest. I actually don't think it's not a 2021. It's not a 2017. It's not a, in past booms where absolutely there's a real FOMO. And I would say a lot of first-time buyers are still very picky. High rates lead to being picky because you still know you've got to pay the mortgage, right? So it isn't just like, oh, let's just buy anything. It doesn't really matter. Times that cash is cheap, like back in 2020. It's like, no, it's still expensive. Do we really want to buy this thing? I've got to pay mortgage on. Yeah, I'm worried about prices going up, but do we really want this? That compromise decision's still there.
Yeah, and to my mind, the other critical issue is unemployment, as we discussed earlier on. Well, Chris, thank you so much for sharing your insights tonight. People are really appreciative in the chat, I can tell you, and we've had some fun and games this evening with your knowledge of the market is so profound. A couple of people have asked, how do they contact you? So what is the best way to get in touch?
So our Blusk website's still up because we're literally launching tomorrow. So if you go to blusk.co.uk, and you just fill in the form there, that'll get shut down over the next few weeks as we move to Flint Group. But if you go to Flint Group, there's a little subscribe button, or email us. Our email addresses are on there. And absolutely, the team would like to help. The first step is just to have a call with our client experience team, and we'll just get to know you, what your plans are, what are you thinking, what's your next move, what are you considering? Like it's a very sort of slow, relaxed process because, I think what the big fail of the broking industry sometimes does is it gets straight to solutions and just trying to keep, like, hang on a sec, let's figure out what you can and can't do first, and let's think about your life. And so that's the process we go through. It's not a mud on the wall. And absolutely would love to help anyone listening here get a bit more clarity.
Great. Excellent. Well, thank you for that, Chris. And we should also mention the Elephant in the Room podcast that you and Veronica have been running for a long, long time. And I recommend that to absolutely everybody that I come across, because it's another great source of info, and you have your own guests and stuff on there as well.
Absolutely. I think it's 300. I don't even know how many episodes it is. I probably should know, but it's been like 5 or 6 years, one a week. So it's probably 300 or something. Lots of learnings. And anyone wants to come and listen to that, we'd appreciate it. And any guests we'd love us to interview. We're always trying to figure out who haven't we spoke to, because we've spoken to you lots of times, Martin. I've spoken to lots of people, and we're running out of choice. Chris Joy, if you want to come on, let me know.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
Chris, thank you so much.
Awesome,
Really
mate.
appreciate your
Thanks,
time. All the best, and we will connect again down the track, and we'll explore the property, which will be different again. It always changes, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
So interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Well, maybe there's a few rate cut in that before our next chat. Let's see how that goes.
Let's hope. Let's
chat in June or something, and hopefully your parcel comes, Martin. So we'll talk soon.
No, well, I missed the UPS so far, so that's good. So later on. See ya. Bye bye. There you go, folks. Hope you enjoyed that. And Chris, always great value. Just to say that next week we've got crypto, and Adam Stokes is back. We're going to talk about crypto and what's happening there. Quite a lot to explore. And I want to say thank you very much for spending some time with us this evening. Check out our recorded shows in the week, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. This is Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics, signing off. Cheerio.